Hello, super quick intro. Today is a day that I've been excited about and also dreading at the same time, because today we are showing you how to disassemble and then reassemble the Hourglass puzzle, which is so far the hardest puzzle I have done. It took me over 2 hours to take it apart first time round. It took me over 2 hours again to put it back together, which in my opinion is actually harder. So today I'm going to be showing you how you can disassemble the puzzle, how you can reassemble the puzzle, hopefully in the easiest, simplest to follow along to way. So as you follow along, just make sure you got the orientation right and make sure that each piece is in the right place, especially when you're putting it back together, because as I said, that is the hardest part. So let's get straight on with it. Okay, so here is a fully assembled Hourglass puzzle. Now before we start, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to describe the different pieces as we are going along. Now if you didn't already know, there is 4 pieces to this puzzle, and there is 2 pieces that are exactly the same. These are the bits here with a gap in there and a gap in there. I'm going to call those bits the gap pieces. And then the other 2 pieces are solid. There's no gaps in either of them, and I'm going to call those the solid pieces to keep it nice and simple. Each piece also has a back to it, so there's a bit that is completely flat, and then there is a bit that looks like this, that's got loads of little various heights and divots and everything along with those. And then also there is 2 ends to each puzzle, so there is the big end here, and then there is the horn end, or what I'm going to call the horn end, because if you look here, there and there, they look a little bit like horns. So that's how I'm going to describe it as we're going along. So to start with, we need to get the right end, or we need to start with the right way up. So when we separate the 4 pieces like this, I want to have the solid pieces on the top. So these bits don't have a gap in, they're the solid pieces. I want to be up here with this piece, or with these pieces. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take those solid pieces and we're going to slide the right hand side down and the left hand side up. And then from there we can separate the 4 pieces into this position. Now it usually gets to a right angle here and then gets a little bit stuck. Now I've found that the best way, or the easiest way to separate these so that they're opposite each other, which is where we're aiming for, is first of all to send the bits in the middle, the gap pieces, if we get those opposite each other first, and then follow that around with the solid pieces, it's a little bit easier to get to this position. And then once we're in this position, what we want to do is take the outside pieces, the solid pieces, and once they're in the right position, if they're not, give them a bit of a wiggle, and then we pull them apart and we get into this position here. Once we're in this position, we are going to swap the gap pieces around. So the top gap piece was on the left hand side, now we want it on the right hand side, and the same, well, we want the opposite with the bottom piece, we want that one going left. So we're going to swap the sides, and then we're going to hit a sticking point where these 2 bits clash or get in each other's way. To avoid that, we're going to drop the top gap piece down, and then when we wiggle it around, we should be able to get that bit past there, and then when we pull, we can end up in this position here. So then if we turn the whole puzzle so we are looking down on the solid pieces, what we're going to do next is make a square with all 4 pieces. Now this is a little bit of a tough move, and what we need to do here is essentially just a little bit of fidgeting. What I like to do is essentially do sort of circles as I'm doing this movement, and what we're trying to do is stand this gap piece up into this position. So if I pull this top bit around and give it a wiggle as we're doing it, it should, when every piece falls or gets into the right place, end up looking like this. And now that we've got a square position, the next position we're aiming for is to turn these into like a daisy chain. And to do that, we're going to use this top right hand corner, and we're going to flatten these 2 pieces out, so we've almost got a very dodgy triangle shape. We're going to push these through each other, and then from there we're going to bring this piece, the gap piece, up through the middle of the solid piece, and then we're going to let them hang down, and we're going to end up in this position here. So gap piece on the top, gap piece on the bottom, 2 solid pieces connecting them. And then to get into a chain position, what we're going to do is we're going to take the left hand side solid piece, We're going to bring it halfway through and up to here, and then at this point we can turn that piece and then slide through the gap in the gap piece. Next, what we're going to do is, to make it a little bit easier to do the next bit, we're just going to get this piece and turn it around that corner. And then what we can do is grab this gap piece and rotate it 180 degrees. And then we can slide it out the bottom of the solid piece and we create this chain. The next thing we're going to do is turn this one chain into two separate chains. So right here we've got a gap piece here, a solid piece in the middle, a gap piece in the middle, and then a solid piece on the end. What we're going to do now is take the gap piece that's in the middle, we're going to take the solid piece that's on the end, and we're going to push it through that gap piece. This bit's going to get in the way slightly, so we just move that off to the side, we push the gap piece, the solid piece through the gap piece, and then that comes around and hangs down here. Then we're going to do the same movement we did to separate the square into a chain. We're going to take the solid piece on the left hand side, we're going to come up to halfway, and then we're going to turn it out from here. We're going to go through the gap in the gap piece, and now here the 180 degree turn is much easier to do because they're not all connected together. So we turn it around and then we can pull it through the bottom here. And then we've got the easiest part of the whole puzzle. We now just need to separate these two separate pieces from each other by doing essentially the same thing. So the first thing, we're going to take the gap piece again, but at the minute this solid piece is the wrong way around. So we're going to push it through and then let it drop through or pull through to this side. And then we can do that same move and coming up to halfway, coming out, going out the gap, turning that top gap piece round, and then feeding those out from there. And then we just repeat that process again. So we want the gap piece here, we need to flip these pieces around, so we're going to come up and then through the middle. Then we're going to come up to halfway, turn out again, push it through the gap, rotate the gap piece, and then pull that bit out from there. And that is how you disassemble the hourglass puzzle. And putting the hourglass back together, in my opinion, is harder than taking it apart, because you have to get back to that chain position with each separate piece in exactly the right position. So it is very important that you get these next few steps exactly right. So to start with, we are going to take one solid piece. We're going to turn it so we're looking at the back of it, and we want the big part of it, not the horn part of it. We're going to take a gap piece. We want to also see the back of it, but we want the horn end of this. Then we're going to put the horns through the big piece. Then we're going to rotate from there. We're going to bring the solid piece back through the gap in the gap piece, and then we're going to let it drop down from there. Then all we need to do is just lift this piece up, come through the middle, and then do exactly the same thing with the other two pieces. So again, the solid piece, we want to see the back of it, we want the big end, we want to see the back of the gap piece, but we want the horn end. And again, that's going to go through the solid piece and then twist around 180 degrees, come back through the gap, drop down, and then we're going to come up through the middle and push it through, so we're in this position again as well. So at the minute they are both in exactly the same positions. Now to connect the two pieces together, we're going to do it slightly different. So here we want face up, but the big end of the solid piece, but we still want to see the back of the gap piece, and again we're using the horn end. So that's going to go through the middle just like it has done before. It's going to rotate, it's going to come back through the gap and then drop down. And to complete that chain, we just need to get the second solid piece up to this end of the top gap piece. And for that, we're just going to come up and, oh no we're not, we're going to go around and then up. Now I can't stress this enough, you have to be in this position in order for the next pieces or the next parts of the puzzle to work. So right now, check whether you are in this position. If you are not, go back a few minutes and do these steps again. If you are, then you are ready for the next steps. Your next job is to turn that chain back into a square. So we're going to have the solid end on the left, the gap end on the right. Now we don't just want to go straight in here because we'll be slightly in the wrong position for the next few moves. So what we want to do is we're going to turn one of the pieces. I'm going to turn the gap piece 180 degrees before I put it through here. So essentially I want the back of the gap piece going through the front of the solid piece, but you need to remember which way around you did the twist. Let's just get that out of the way, because you just need to reverse that 180 degrees in order for it all to line up. So once we've done that, we do the twist back around, we bring the gap back through the gap piece, and then we let it drop back down to here. And to turn it back into a square, we're going to take this gap piece that's on top, we're going to twist it clockwise and go through the solid piece. Now you need to get this bit out of the way, just move it to the back so that the gap can go through the solid piece, and then we pull those apart and we are back into this square position. Now the position for the next bit is very important as well. What we want is the gap pieces to be on the sides, and we also want the gap pieces as backs to face each other. So here we want to turn around that corner and around that corner there, so that when I'm looking down I can see the gap pieces have their backs to each other and the fronts are facing me for the solid pieces. Now the next move, we are going from this square back into sort of the inline position here. Now before you attempt this is going to be the hardest move of the entire puzzle, but with both disassembling it and then putting it back together. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the end solid pieces sort of together like this. We would need the top bit going behind the bottom solid piece. And then essentially it's just a case of getting it lined up with every other bit. So here we can then turn it to sort of a bird's eye view. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to put it back together. And once everything's lined up, we end up here. And again, that's going to take a lot of practice. That's about my third go at attempting it just now. And I've done this a lot of times before. But then once we're in this position, we've done all the hard work. We can sort of shuffle it around and pull, and we end up back in this position here. And then we've just got one simple step that we need to follow to get it back to a fully reassembled hourglass. And what that is to sort these pieces around. So now, what we just had was the top gap piece was on the right hand side, but we want it to be on the left. And we want the bottom gap piece to go to the right. So we're going to pull into this position. But again, these two bits are going to sort of get in the way. Now it's not quite as simple to get these to glide over the top of each other, but once you do, pull those gap pieces and sort of lock it in place like this, and then all we need to do is essentially bring these two up here and these two pieces up here. Now I've found that the simplest way to do that is to first of all lead with the solid pieces. And again, this is very, very fiddly. And once you've got them to here, then separately bring around the gap pieces, and it just makes it a little bit easier. There's less clanging together, there's less things that need to glide past each other if you do it one thing at a time. And once you're back in this position, we can then turn up to here, and we can do the opposite of what we did at the very start. We bring this solid piece down, drop it down, and we bring the solid piece on the left up, and then we can slide those pieces together here, end up back here, and click those back into place, and that is how you reassemble the hourglass puzzle. So there we go. As I said, this one is very, very hard to do, and it is so important that you get each of the 4 bits in the right orientation when you make the chain before you go anywhere else, because you can't go anywhere else unless it's in the exact right positions. Now hopefully those instructions, that routine is easy for you to follow along to. I tried to make it, I tried to do it in the the easiest way that I knew possible. It took me I spent about a week practicing every night the solution, right? How can we make this a little bit easier? There are some ways of making it slightly quicker, but it's not as easy to show the steps to doing that. And the important part here is that we actually get it apart and then we actually put it back together. The time is not important in that regard. So hopefully I have done a half decent job of walking you through the solution. If I have or I haven't, please let me know in the comments below with what you think of the hourglass puzzle. And if you are new around here, then you can watch some of these other Hanayama solutions and watch me solving them for the first time by clicking those 2 videos over there. You can also subscribe by clicking my face here, and I will see you next time. Peace!